Welcome to the video. I thought I'd do a video today on the purchases I've made in the last couple of months. I had this idea that I was going to do one of these kind of every month, including finds at record fairs when I go, which is not that often. But there's been such a flurry of vinyl purchasing activity in the last couple of months. It's taken me this long to get around to doing it. So I've got a pile here. I'm going to rattle through them, make some comments, and maybe make some recommendations for those of you who aren't familiar with the artists that I've been buying, the music I've been buying. So these days I do like sound. Um, there was a time when I was interested in popular music only, rock music, but of course, it wasn't too long before I got into classical and then eventually into soundtracks and jazz as well, and so on and so forth. But I listen to a lot of soundtracks these days because this the modern soundtrack, rather than the big rousing orchestral pieces that we're familiar with from films in the 50s and the 60s. They're a lot more experimental these days. It's more about creating soundscapes, and makes for really interesting and intriguing listening. So I'm just going to highlight two or three that I've bought in the last couple of months. Not all of them, but here we are. The first one I just want to highlight is Handmaid's Tale by Adam Taylor. Really interesting. It's like I say, despite what I said before about it being surprising, there are a lot of soundtracks that use uh, the sorrowful sound of the cello, and the cello is all over this, but it's kind of dark, intriguing, mysterious, and it kind of opens with a bit of spoken word from the main character. And I've read the book a couple of times, but I've not seen the series. But this is a soundtrack. It's really good. If you like a dark, brooding, late night listening, this is brilliant. Really good. I'm very impressed with it. Um, Second one is Warren Ellis, who you will know from his work with Nick Cave. Kind of a little bit similar to the last one in that it's kind of there's more electronic, but there's violin in here as well. This was composed and recorded a lot on trains, and there's some spoken word in this as well. But it's typical Warren Ellis kind of sound effects all over the place. That dark, mysterious kind of soundscape. But this is good. One of my favorites from Warren Ellis, actually, because I think I might have said before, I've never really taken to too many of the soundtracks that he and Nick Cave have put out. Um, Another soundtrack before I get onto that one. Right, this one by Clint Mansell, In the Earth. This is stereo, sounds like a surround sound mix. You sit in the hot seat in your listening space, sounds coming from all over the place. It's beautifully mixed. Electronic. This is the guy, Clint Mansell, who did the Moon soundtrack. I think this one's better. Great soundscapey again. Um, Again, if you like that sort of stuff, it's fantastic. It's really, really good. Very, very impressed. Right, that's the soundtracks. Um, Lucinda Williams, Running Down a Dream, her tribute to Tom Petty. Now, anybody who's followed Lucinda Williams, and I have for about 25 years, um, really took to those early albums. Um, Cartwheels on a Gravel Road which was big, and then her big international breakthrough. Excuse me. Um, but I really like her. But she's been pumping out a lot of albums in the last 2 or 3 years, which are kind of tributes. Just Bob Dylan one. Anyway, there's just been a few of them. This is kind of unremarkable. It's her in the studio. It's kind of very, very nice. It's typical Lucinda Williams vocal style, but all the arrangements are pretty predictable. So quite unremarkable, but quite a bit of a pleasant listen. Something completely different. This is the Amorphous Androgynous, with a little bit of vocals from Peter Hamill, he of Van der Graaf Generator fame. Um, Now, it's a duo. It's a kind of an alternative band to their main band, if you can call it a band, as that's the Future Sound of London. And I also bought a number of Future Sound of London albums um, in this last month. Again, electronics soundscapey stuff. Yeah, really good. So if you like a bit of, this is more prog. This is more kind of reminiscent of the dance scene a little bit. It's kind of a bit of Brian Eno-ish maybe. The Orb, also if you like those, maybe FX Twin, you'll find a lot to enjoy in Future Sound in London. And this is a remarkably pleasant album, amorphous, androgynous. And the title of the album is "We Persuade Ourselves We Are Immortal." Very good. Fleet Foxes and Shaw. Now this is essentially a solo album. Now the guy who does it, goodness me, oh, is it? Yeah, Robin Pecknold. Do you know the Fleet Foxes? Acoustic, folk, Beach Boys harmonies. Sounds brilliant. Sounds really, really pleasant. This is no exception. It's a really, really good album. It might even be, and I've only listened to it twice so far, so it might be my favorite Fleet Foxes album. But yeah, I was quite surprised by that one. It's got a stub on the corner. I picked it up for £11, I think it was, or £10 at a record fair in Birmingham. So for £10, it's a 3-sided album, I think. It's really good, really good. One I've had on CD for a very, very long time has just come out on vinyl, and it's Jeff Buckley's posthumous second album, Sketches for My Sweetheart. This is a triple vinyl album. When Jeff Buckley put out Grace, he put out a bunch of EPs, and after he died, there was loads of live shows put out on CD. This, of course, was released, and I hoovered them up, all of them up on CD. But this one, I don't believe it was released on vinyl initially, but it's here and it's now. So that's great. It's patchy, of course. If you know Jeff Buckley and you know this album, it's very, very patchy. It's kind of demo style. Tom Verlaine produced it, I think. Yeah, Tom Verlaine produced it from television, of course. But yeah, it's worth having in the collection. So I really wanted this one. Something completely different. Jan Garbarek and the Hilliard Ensemble, Officium. Now, I got into Jan Garbarek is he Norwegian? Someone will tell me. It's a quick race through here, so I'm not going to give you a chapter and verse on all of these artists. But he plays soprano and tenor saxophone, but mostly his sound is soprano. And he's very, very, I discovered him on an ECM CD compilation called Selected Signs 1. And you have this keyboard washers, electronics in the background, and this beautiful soprano sax that floats over the top of it. Just heaps of atmosphere. And then I bought this album, which is a double CD called Rights, which is more of that. So loads and loads of electronics, but all very, very gentle in the background. But this incredible, beautiful sounding saxophone, really good. So I thought I'd go and see him, and I went to see him with the Hilliard Ensemble. And before I went, I bought this album on CD, and I saw him at Birmingham Symphony Hall. And the Hilliard Ensemble are just a vocal group. Now, this album, basically, it's a double album. It's of pre-classical vocal music, kind of religious music, but with the saxophone. So it's a really interesting, eclectic mix of sounds here. It's kind of almost like Gregorian chant. It's really quite beautiful. But this show I went to see him at, it was really strange because I think there's 4 in the Hilliard Ensemble. Yep, there's four of them. They came on stage, stood in a row, and then Garbarek came on to applause, decked out in a suit with this small soprano saxophone, and proceeded to play, I think probably the whole of the album, an hour and a half, something like that. Said nothing to the audience, and then simply walked off the stage at the end. And I thought, this is supposed to be kind of a jazz gig, but an ECM type jazz gig. But it was really quite a strange experience. And I didn't really like this album that much, to be honest with you. But again, I picked this up at a record fair, brand new, but only for a tenner. Well, I thought I'll give it another go. Something remarkable, I think, about when you sit in the sweet spot and you have no distractions and you give close to 100% concentration on the music that's playing in front of you. That kind of brings it alive. And this, when I've listened to this on vinyl, it's a completely different experience to how it was for me when I was listening to it on CD. So if you like ECM, um, you probably won't like this Jan Garbarek album, but it's still great. Uh, Interesting compilation from Sparks, triple set, and of course I bought This Town Ain't Big Enough for Both of Us back in 1973, I think it was, as a single. Never really took to the band. I've got two or three of those earlier albums, but didn't follow them very far. But this was just such a steal, and it's got loads and loads of tracks. It hasn't got Beat the Clock on it, unfortunately, but it's still great. Weirdest, I mean, this is weirdness to the max, really. So if you like Sparks, you'll know this album. You'll know all the tracks on this album, probably. But for me, it was nice to dip into that sound. Although it's probably not going to be a regular play, it's going to be in amongst my listening. Um, this one, I was going to do a video on comparing it to the original, and I haven't got around to doing it yet. And my excuse is that I want to live with this album for a little bit, even though it's been very controversial, and that's Roger Waters' Dark Side of the Moon Redux or Redo. So it's the 2023 redo of Dark Side. Very interesting. I'll talk about that on another video. This one, U2 Songs of Surrender, which is kind of a bit of a more of acoustic, raw playing of their, most of their famous songs, some deep cuts in here as well. I like this, actually. I do, U2 became very, very bombastic. Although, I've seen them many times and I've bought their albums and there's always gems on there. So I do like U2. I mean, Bono's up his own backside a little bit too much for my liking. But I thought I'll try this, and I'm pleasantly surprised. Sure, it's not rousing. It's not full of, loud banging tracks and high energy, but it's good. It's a mature work and worthy of listening to if you're a U2 fan. Four more, and then I'm done. The Unthanks. Folk, modern folk. They've got two female singers. So you've got Rachel and Becky Unthank. This is a lovely package, by the way. This is another one that I had on CD for a while. It's called Here's the Tender Coming. Anyway, what's remarkable about this is that it's the vocals are very, very prominent. So it's kind of all about the vocals, really. And the arrangements around them are very sparse, and there's lots of almost like a cappella vibe to it as well. But it's absolutely beautiful. And they sing in an unapologetically Geordie accent, so kind of Northumberland, Newcastle, but Northumberland. It's absolutely a beautiful album. If you're interested in folk music and you like really distinctive voices, because they're both very different voices, but both brilliant, this is a tremendous album. Definitely one to get. The Unthanks. Here's the Tender Coming. Had this one on CD as well, but I've been wanting to get around to buy this for ages, but I finally got around to doing it, and that is Curtis by Curtis Mayfield. This is the famous one. This one has the famous Move On Up on. There's the outside cover, the inside cover. But for me, the track it's the opener that got me to buy this album. Don't worry, if there's a hell below, we're all gonna go. So absolutely classic album. Really pleased to have that on vinyl. Now, in the last video, I was doing a bit of a cleanup exercise on my favorite albums, best albums of 1977, and I did, and I was, because someone mentioned, well, why didn't you mention Steely Dan's Asia. And I thought, well, Asia, I've got to talk about Asia. So I thought, oh yeah, Asia, of course, yeah, yeah. So I played it again, and I made this video, and I said, oh my god, this is so low energy, and they say this is a audiophile album, but not for me, not for me. Anyway, somebody else well, more than one person commented and said, yeah, but you've got to get the right pressing. You've got to get the original US first pressing, which has this particular catalog number. I had mine as the UK original, and then there's the UHQR version that's been released recently, which is the double 45, which costs about £200 if you import it from America to the UK. £200 for Asia. You have to be kidding. But anyway, there is a £30 version that I was prompted to buy, not on a recommendation by the commenter on my last video. But I thought, why don't I, maybe there is a story to be told around the different pressings. And I thought, I'll try this new digital Bernie Grundman mastered version. And it is still low energy. Yeah. And I'm going to come back to that in a second. However, it does sound better than the one I've got. It is kind of a digital file, I think. It sounds brighter. The bass sounds better. Donald Fagen's vocals are still a little bit recessed for my liking, but this is definitely better. So I've listened to this a few times. I've really been punishing myself by going through this particular album for a while, but I've got to give it a chance after having the UK pressing for about nearly 40 years, or 40 years maybe. And finally, prompted by listening to Asia, I picked up an album that I bought a few months ago that I just haven't got around to listening to yet, and that is Steely Dan again. And this is Northeast Corridor, a double live album. This is recorded at the Beacon Theatre and the Orpheum Theatre. It's in memory of Walter Becker, so it's obviously Donald Fagen with his kind of touring band or an ensemble he put together. I think on these shows he also did a run through of the Nightfly. But this album is absolutely great, and I'm not a huge fan of Steely Dan, but give them their due. This is banging. The sound is fantastic. Sure, it sounds live. You can tell that Donald Fagen's vocals, Fagen's vocals are weaker, but they're beautifully covered up by the background vocalist, the female background vocalist. They do a fantastic job, and there's a real mixture of tracks from most, if not all, of their albums, and they sound, as I say, absolutely brilliant. So that's a great album. Very impressed. And I'm just going to throw in one more thing. And this is a CD box set that I managed to pick up. I was going to buy this on vinyl, but it didn't have all of the tracks. And this is called Intrigue. It's got a long subtitle. It's called Stephen Wilson Presents Progressive Sounds in UK Alternative Music, 1979 to 1989. And this is a 4 CD box set. And it has Wire, Bill Nelson Magazine, XTC, Public Image, The Stranglers, Simple Minds, Cocteau Twins, Tears for Fears, early stuff, of course, Thomas Dolby, David Sylvian, Joy Division, and many others. And I've not been all the way through this yet, but let me just make one comment that might encourage you to investigate it. Apart from funk music and disco music, and some notable exceptions, I think a lot of drumming, a lot of the rhythm section around rock music in the 1970s was pretty pedestrian. The drums were kind of often recessed in the mix. And I say there's going to be some honorable exceptions, like Bonham, of course, maybe Collins too, Bruford, and there's lots of great drummers, no doubt about it. But there's something about the rhythm being kind of recessed, almost an afterthought. The key instruments was the voice and the lead guitar, maybe keyboards up to a point, depending on the music. You get to this 1979 onwards. What is really striking about this is that in this popular alternative music, which was still popular, kind of new wavy, the rhythm section came right to the foreground. And the rhythms are super interesting on these, and they are not an afterthought. They are the heart of the song. So, for example, Public Image Limited. Um, if you're a fan of Public Image, you know that kind of the bass guitar and was a, such an important instrument for them as they as their career went through the 80s and beyond. So yeah, I'm it's intrigue. I'm intrigued. Maybe you should be too if you got this, if you got a certain sympathy and a taste for this kind of 80s music and the bands I've mentioned. So anyway, that's a not so quick run through. It's never quick, is it, with me? I'm sorry. Maybe I should try some shorts, but that'll maybe on another occasion. So that's a quick run through anyway of the highlights of the purchases I've made in the last month or two. All right, I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Ta-da.